I mean, it's an honest to God absolute priv to be here for Red, Gold, and Bold. Look at the giggles beginning already. If you're joining us via the podcast, we say thank you very much. Welcome. If you are catching us on the podcast, remember you can catch us live. We stream the podcast live every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Central. And here with us, as always, from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Jeff Chadiha, of course, from Sumer Sports, Eric Eager, SumerSports.com, Soren Petro, Sports Radio 810 WHB. That's my name. You can catch my radio show 2 to 6 p Central Time at 810WHB.com. And got a lot to get to coming off the bye. You know, Andy Reid is just so good after the bye. The Chiefs are now 12.5-point favorites over the Titans. We'll talk about that. How do the Chiefs do at the trade deadline? Kadarius Toney coming, Rashad Fenton going. What does this mean for Skyy Moore? Does Kadarius Toney make an impact this year? Is Ronald Jones on his way out of town after his latest Twitter fest? Britt Reid is sentenced to 3 years in prison today. How good are these Tennessee Titans? Can Derrick Henry be stopped? Does Mike Vrabel have Patrick Mahomes' numbers? We'll get our predictions for this game and maybe even a look ahead to the second half. Don't know. Don't know if we'll have time, guys, to get it all in, but we sure as hell will try. Jeff, how about it? Let's open up with that trade deadline. They get Kadarius Toney for a 3rd and 6th round pick. They move on from Rashad Fenton. They do, I guess it should be mentioned, Trent McDuffie gets activated as well by the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's one of the reasons why Rashad Fenton was made expendable. But what do you think? Is this a good deadline for the Chiefs or not so much?
I think it was fine. I mean, I really did not see them being major players. And ultimately, I mean, Kadarius Toney, it's an intriguing pickup, but it's not like a groundbreaking change or season type move. And they shouldn't be making those kind of moves at the stage they're at, you know, in the Patrick Mahomes, whatever journey we're taking with him as this team's quarterback. I mean, they're a really good team. They're one of the best 3 teams in the NFL. They have enough talent to win a championship, even though I think Buffalo and Philadelphia, most people would tell you, are the 2 best teams in the NFL right now. And that's a good place to be. I mean, they're not, I think in the first, 4 years of Patrick Mahomes being the quarterback here, this team chasing championships, it made sense to try to, improve yourself as best you could, to take big swings at the trade deadline. And I know we live in a world where people want that kind of stuff to happen, but ultimately there's a reason why guys are available at this time of year. Oftentimes there are reasons you don't want to have to deal with. I think Kadarius Toney is going to be more of a bigger asset to this team next season. Maybe he can return punts for you this year, but I don't see him walking in here and taking over the offense or making a bunch of big plays. I think they got the guys they want to catch passes. I think he's a guy to help them when Juju Smith-Schuster and McCole Hardman are done with their contracts.
The Rashad Fenton piece today, thoughts on that?
I don't know. I was never a big Rashad Fenton guy. I mean, I think for them it's good that they got something for him, but it felt more like, from what I read and saw, I didn't do any homework on this part of it, but it seemed like it was more of a salary cap move than anything else, a numbers game. They've got younger corners. He wasn't going to be back here next year. They found a team that needed cornerback help in a big way in the Falcons, and so it made sense, but I don't think that him leaving is going to change what this team is or what's going to be.
Yeah. All right, Eric, your thoughts? Kadarius Toney is brought in, 3rd and 6. Rashad Fenton is sent packing. Good, bad, get a letter grade? How would you define what they did at the trade deadline?
Yeah, I think I made it about $1 million surplus if you look at what, Toney's draft capital and possibilities as far as, last season he averaged about 1.9 yards per route run. So he, I think is a fairly solid player. Obviously there are real issues with, the Giants needing wide receivers and somehow letting him go for far less than the draft capital that he was acquired for less than a year and a half ago. So that's certainly a problem. I think this is, and Jeff is 100% right, this is very much a move for next year. As you said on the show today, Petro, next year at wide receiver, it's going to be MVS, it's going to be Skyy Moore, it's going to be, McCole Hardman and Juju possibly being re-signed. And to me, I think the biggest issue is going to be, can Kadarius Toney at worst be McCole Hardman next year, and at best, kind of be what Juju Smith-Schuster is, because I don't think the Giants drafted him at 20 to be a gadget player for this team.
Yeah. How about the aspect of I like the Kadarius Toney deal, but I think it may be nothing when it's all said and done. I mean, the Giants couldn't get anything out of him. We've seen the Chiefs. Eric chronicled it a little bit last week. Make a move for a lot of other failed first and second round picks, high picks that clearly they valued coming out of the draft that they weren't able to turn around. So I don't know that you know that this is going to be any better, although it's a little bit more of a recent draft pick. But I like what I see. I see at least a replacement for McCole Hardman, right? If he's going to break the bank, if somebody's going to overpay for him, you've at least got a guy who can do some of the similar skills. The jet sweeps. And McCole Hardman hasn't become a complete receiver. I think he's probably a better receiver right now than Kadarius Toney is. That has to be part of the problem, is that he doesn't play receiver. I mean, Florida did double screens and all these things where they were getting the ball in his hands in a fairly efficient manner, but not really, oh, look at that, 20-yard pattern he ran, and he turned the DB clear around, and, man, he split the corner in the safety. Like real wide receiver stuff, we haven't seen the guy do. He's a gadget piece right now that you hope you can teach the wide receiver position. But McCole Hardman's a gadget piece. So, I mean, if nothing else, just being able to catch the punts will be an addition for the Chiefs. I'm with you, Jeff. Fenton, not to lob another grenade at Eric's former employer, but the grades always seem to be higher than what we saw production-wise, and certainly higher than what the Chiefs would trust. And he was asked to do more this year, and those grades came down. And I think that was accurate. He was put in positions to succeed. They weren't able to hide him as much this year. He got exposed, and we found out that he's a Jag, which makes him an NFL player, just makes him a guy, right?
It does show something that he was a 6th-round pick who 4 years into his rookie deal garnered just a 7th, right? Like that is, as far as, whether or not we're pricing these players properly, like Fenton, and I'll be the first to tell you, linebacker and cornerback and safety grades at PFF, they oscillate pretty badly from year to year, right? If you are, not the player that's being picked on, right? If Mike Hughes is being picked on across from you, or Charvarius Ward is being picked on across from you, like that's going to help your grade, because not being thrown to gives you a little bit of a positive at PFF. So there was an aspect of Fenton. I mean, we knew this going in. I think I said this last week. Like, he had already been beaten out in the minds of the Chiefs by Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams. You get Najee Johnson, a player from Marshall who has corner safety flexibility as well, that was on the practice squad previously, had been up as well. So yeah, he was expendable. And you get a 7th-round pick there. You get back a little bit of draft capital from the Toney trade, not much, but it was a move where they can open up a roster spot for Toney and not have to give up one of the players that was on the roster already.
Yeah. I think I'll go back to, by the way, I didn't notice that until somebody said it looked like Eric is just a floating head based upon how his shirt blends in with the
I was a panelist today at the Cincinnati area industrial technology fair. So I wore a nice sweater today. I kept it on all day. I kept it on for you guys. And I'm in I'm in my happy chair right now.
All right.
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good, Petro.
Jeff, I guess it wouldn't be a day if he wasn't speaking to somebody.
Yeah, that's true.
I felt good today because the Chiefs held their water. I felt good today.
And I was going to highlight that one right here. Matt said it was a great deadline because they didn't torpedo their cap for 2 years from now when other teams will be hurting. And Matt's right. We've talked about it. Matt, a student of the pod and one of our regulars, and always does a great job with his comments. That is, we've seen teams. I think it is really interesting. And one of the things we put up to discuss was, did anybody in the AFC catch the Chiefs? Now, we know the Bills are already in front of them. I'm not insinuating that the Chiefs are number one. We're acknowledging that the Bills are out there at the front of the class. But I don't think anybody ran the Chiefs down for the number 2 spot with their moves. But it is amazing. And, Jeff, this has been one of your go-to points, whether it was here on Red, Gold, and Bold or on our NFL podcast, Too Deep, about how the imitation of the Rams. that's going on. Everybody's saying, okay,
Oh.
we're all in. Like, look, the Rams did it. This is how it works. So now we got to do it. The Dolphins clearly are taking a page out of the Rams book with what they went out and did with Bradley Chubb. And I know we'll talk more about that tomorrow on Too Deep. But I think the Chiefs are not in that position, right? They don't have a first contract quarterback that they can, load everything up. And they're not in a position, to Matt's point, they don't really need to, right? Like how much, the Dolphins didn't move in front of the Chiefs as far as the odds makers are concerned. So they got better.
Not only that, Petro, the Dolphins Super Bowl odds did not change when they traded for Bradley Chubb, that is an even more important point to make, by the way.
Why?
Well, because the whole argument everybody's talking about today is like, I'd rather win a Super Bowl than have a great cap 2-3 years from now. And I'm like, fellas, this is not actually changing your probability of winning the Super Bowl that much. Like, I'm going to level with people right now. The Chiefs melting down in the second half of the Bengals game influenced the Rams Super Bowl odds way more than Von Miller did, right? Shaquisky Tart dropping an interception. That one play affected their Super Bowl odds more than Von Miller did. This is a random thing. The people that believe that any one player, quarterback even, but one non-quarterback is going to budge the odds by any more than like 0.5%, they are mad. That is, again, sorry, my rant there.
No, but to be clear, just to add on to it, I think it's a good one because the point is that the odds, the Super Bowl odds, are reflective of what the real change is, right? We're not saying, well, because I can hear somebody who's not a gambler going, well, what do I care what the odds are? Well, the point is the odds didn't move. So there's going to be probably more people. Dolphin fans are going to run bet the Dolphins now. They're going to get excited about these moves. Yet the odds makers are not budging off of it. They're not moving it, trying to balance out the action because they don't think the Dolphins got any better.
But how much of that Dolphins not getting better is they share the same division as the Bills, right? That affects the odds too.
Much. Yeah. But I think also it's because they share the same conference as the Bills and Chiefs. And in all likelihood, the Miami Dolphins will have to go through both of those teams to get there. And I think that's probably the bigger reason, Eric, right? Why the numbers don't move is if they get to the playoffs, if this locks them up, they're not going to – they don't – I think it's probably a bigger indication that they don't feel the Dolphins will get to the 2 seed and avoid having to play both. Because if you're the 3, you got to go through both unless somebody else knocks them off. But assuming you've got to do all the lifting, you've got to take them both down. Where the Chiefs will only have to see the Bills and the Bills will only have to see the Chiefs because they're 1 and 2, right? So I think that's the statement there that it didn't get any unless they thought this was going to make the Dolphins undefeated the rest of the way and get them to the 2 seed or drop the Chiefs even to the 4 to where Chiefs and Bills have to play first and the Dolphins get the winner. Like when we roll around to the actual odds at playoff time, whoever only has to see one of those teams is going to be in a significantly better position, right, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest deal is that the Dolphins, by virtue of being a wild card, are a long shot, right? And it's going to require, again, like there are so many things that are out of the Dolphins' control that affect their playoff odds more than us acquiring Bradley Chubb, and like. I mean, even think about when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl in 2019. Like, what was the biggest thing that happened to them? It was the Tennessee Titans knocking off the Ravens, right? Like that was the number one biggest change in the Chiefs' odds. It flipped them from a road team in the AFC title game to a home team in the AFC title game, which is like a humongous. Like, look, a quarterback is worth depending upon the quarterback, worth anywhere from 10 to 20% per game in the any non-quarterback, you're talking about 5% or less, right? So it just is one of those where I think that, and you talked about this eloquently on your show, it's just like, you do not want your cap to be so bad that your Super Bowl win probability in years 2, 3, and 4 from now are 5% less just for the chance to increase it. And again, this is liberal right here, 1% this year. Right? Because it's just not worth it for a team like Mahomes or a team like, the Chiefs with Mahomes. It's just like, you're going to the last thing you want to do is be the Rams. the last thing you want to do, and I know the Rams won the
Well,
Super Bowl.
why would you say that? Yeah, why would you?
But, no,
they're not
but
thinking that in LA though.
But I agree. But the Rams are desolate. That team is not coming back from this, right? Like it's over.
I think to Jeff's point, if you win,
if you win. But
Yeah.
think about this, and again, I need to hammer home this point because I think the Rams being the exception proves the rule. Though, how many things had to go right for the Los Angeles Rams to win the Super Bowl that did not involve
everybody though?
But it's less for a team that gets the 2 seed or the 1 seed and hosts the AFC Championship game and has to, like it again. Like I think the Patriots from 2010 to 2018 were a bye team. They had a bye every single year throughout that. And, so basically you forego one of your playoff games is 100% win probability every time. Right. And so, you need fewer things to go lucky to win. Whereas the Rams needed a number of lucky things to happen that had nothing to do with them that helped them win the Super Bowl. And now if any one of those things goes wrong, they're still in the position they are now, which is a team without a roster that might not even make the playoffs in the NFC and isn't getting better. And again, a team that was razor thin to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think the point is for the Dolphins, this is okay because they don't have Mahomes. They have Tua. Tua's good, but he's probably right now we don't view him as a Hall of Fame guy. So this is what you have to do when you have Matt Stafford. Let's be honest. Matt Stafford may have made himself a Hall of Famer with that win because of the volume of stats he's put up. But there hasn't been a volume of winning. So if you want to win with Matt Stafford, you got to go all in. You want to win with Tua, you got to go all in. The point I think that Eric is making is in the story is for the Chiefs. You don't have to do that. And the Dolphins will. The Rams are going to blow in about 2 years. And the Dolphins
are blow now.
And that's true. And the Dolphins are going to crash hard. That's okay. No one, I don't think anybody's, I'm not at least, ripping them for doing what they did last year with the Rams or the Dolphins this year. It's what you have to do to win when you don't have the truly elite quarterback. Well, I think the point is to say that's not what the Chiefs have to do. It's not what the Bills have to do, although they're doing it more, and we've talked about this, 0 Super Bowl championships, right? That is something you want to erase, even if it means blowing up a couple of years down the road. I think that's the point, right?
Yeah, but let's not forget the Chiefs did it too, right? They went out and signed Sammy Watkins. They went out and traded for Frank Clark. They made these moves.
But when they didn't really know what they had with Patrick Mahomes.
Well, they knew enough. They believed in what they had. They may not have seen it on the field, but they actually said, we're going to build. They're doing, every team does the same thing. I think it's revisionist history to say the Chiefs weren't doing those things.
They were.
But I think what's
they're
important
not now.
to say, I think it's less important to look at the Rams. It's more important to look at Philadelphia. So I think Philadelphia is the truer case study of what you can do when you have that kind of success and you throw a lot of money at the quarterback, it doesn't work out. You can flip it now and you can get back into that mode. So I think there's more GMs out there now who say the mindset of let's get our quarterback and let's keep him for 15 years and have this window be open. And they say let's have every 5 years.
I want
to. Jeff brings up a fantastic example, which is the Eagles. The Eagles are the example twice now of how to do it when the quarterback is cheap, and the example of exactly what the Dolphins are, which is why I'm not dinging the Dolphins. I'm just saying the odds don't get that much better when you do it. However, if the window is very tiny, right? And if you try to get the band back together, I mean, look at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay brought all 22 guys back in 2021. They have no idea. Yeah. The Eagles bottomed out in 2020. They changed course. Howie Roseman does a lot of stuff that I, for example, wasn't a huge fan of, and now they're back at it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff. I know you had something else you want to jump in.
No, I was just going to say that I think that just talking to GMs around the league this year, that's very much – it's not that the Rams are an extreme case of this, but there's a lot less of a belief of you have to go out and find that franchise quarterback you're going to ride for 10 years. The Chiefs have it, which is great, but there's more of a mindset of there are more avenues to win now if you don't have that guy.
Yeah.
And that the Rams did prove that. And Philadelphia, if they win this, can prove it, or Buffalo. Josh Allen was not at the Patrick Mahomes level when he came in, or at least not playing at that level. We didn't see Mahomes as a rookie, so we don't know what he looked like. But ultimately, there is less reliance on that old school formula and more of a belief of we can wheel our deal our way to a championship. And once we have a ring, who cares what happens 5 years from now?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I think there's more of a belief. I think if they believe they're going to do it, it is a little bit of fool's gold. I think it's been shown that you can do it. And I think it's been shown that, finding the elite quarterbacks is still pretty hard. Right. And so, but you still got to show up and play. And what's your best bet? Your best bet is to go all in, right? It's the poker analogy. You can play it. You can slow play it if you have Patrick Mahomes. If you're getting good cards, you don't have to go in all the time. If you're outgunned against somebody, you might as well go all in once and try to take somebody down big. And I think that's what these teams are doing. I want to get back to the Chiefs moves with Kadarius Toney. The 23 part is the impact, right? But what does it do for Skyy Moore, right? This is a guy that a second round pick was invested in, Jeff. Does this say that they're giving up on Skyy Moore, or is it, as we pointed out, Eric referenced something I said today, under contract at wide receiver for next year for the Kansas City Chiefs is Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Skyy Moore, Justin Ross, and not Justin Watkins.
Watson, yeah.
Not Justin Watson. He's not under contract.
Yeah, he's gone. Yeah.
Justin Ross, the hurt Clemson guy who can't run.
Yeah.
He's under contract.
Or turn his head to the side.
Yeah, or turn his head to see the ball. And then the fourth one is, hang on. There's only four. It's I'm forgetting who the fourth one is. Valdes-Scantling, Skyy Moore, Kadarius Toney, and Justin Ross. Those are the only four wideouts. But so from that standpoint, obviously they need Skyy Moore next year for sure. But what does this do for his role now and moving forward?
Well, I don't know. I mean, look, he has embarrassed himself as a punt returner. We can all agree on that. I don't know how much longer Dave Tobe is going to hold out hope that he can make this conversion. I never bought into the idea of you could take a guy who's never returned punts and have him do it at this level and have it be a rollicking success. So we'll see. My bigger concern is that he just hasn't been that much of a part of the offense. And we're in a time now where you're seeing rookie receivers play roles in offenses. And I get that Andy's offense is complex and a lot's asked of young receivers, but I mean, he's like, I don't even know what his stats are. If he has over 100-yard receiving, I'd be shocked. You can look him up right now if you want. If he has more than 5 catches, I'd be shocked. And so for me, it's, he's got tools. And if you watched him in training camp, you saw that. It's just a little bit disheartening that they haven't found a way to do more with him, even within some of the stuff that McCole Hardman has done, stuff that Tyreek Hill did early in his career. Andy's very creative with players, but sometimes you have so many things you want to do with all these different weapons that a guy can get lost. So, yeah, I'm not giving up on him because he's a rookie, but I thought he would have done more by now. And I know Eric certainly did because he was making bets about him having 700 yards receiving.
I was in that category too. Let's not just throw Eric under the bus. You can throw me right in there with him. 6 catches for 100 yards. You were way off, Jeff. Way off. Monstrous. 6 for 100 yards.
Okay, right, 100. Huh?
Yeah, on 12 targets too, by the way. He's 50% catch ratio.
I mean, 8.3 yards a target's not a bad number.
Okay, so what does it mean for him?
I think
he get frozen.
Yeah, I think he did. or he's deep in thought.
We've learned anything.
Eric, we'll see if
I'm here. Am I back?
There he is. You're back now.
Okay. If we've learned anything about the Chiefs this year, it's that number one, sort of everything wide receivers are fairly hard to come by. And without them, you need guys to complement each other, right? So Juju is kind of the crosser guy. MVS is kind of the deep guy. And, McCole Hardman's the gadget guy. Skyy Moore, we felt like could have been a good all-around guy. I think next year when you look at that receiving core, Skyy Moore and Kadarius Toney are going to be complements to each other, I think, right? Like, because, there's going to be that kind of all-around receiver that they probably want Skyy Moore to be in Juju's stead if Juju leaves, right? And I think Kadarius Toney is going to be somewhat of a replacement for Hardman. Now, there's going to be some crossover, but I think there's more than enough space for both guys to play in this offense, right? I mean, like that I guess is sure. I guess, there's a little bit of a ding on him that he hasn't played and that he hasn't generated a role. But I think also part of that is Juju's on pace for 1,000 yards. Marquez Valdes-Scantling's on pace for 900. And as we talked about last week, Patrick Mahomes has better statistics than he did a season ago. Like, part of it is like, this isn't broke, and the team and the guys that they wanted playing wide receiver to start the season are doing fine.
Yeah. No, I listen, I agree. I think it is of note what's going on with Skyy Moore. You'd like to see more, but second year is oftentimes a big time for wide receivers because it's a fairly complex position. Did Ronald Jones begin his exodus with his tweets, or does Andy Reid just call him in and say, settle down, you're going to get your chance at some point, just focus and get back to work? Which is this a bigger deal than, I mean, he hasn't played, so I don't think anyone's like, oh my God, how will the Chiefs move forward without Ronald Jones if they decide to go that direction? But is he just precipitating his own release there, Jeff?
I remember when Jerick McKinnon got re-signed and whatever late in the offseason, we had this conversation about what it meant. And I kind of tongue-in-cheek said it means they're kind of worried about their running back room. And now I'm pretty sure Ronald Jones was the guy they were worried about. I just don't see where he fits in here now. He signed before they drafted Pacheco, before they re-signed McKinnon. And yeah, I can understand his frustration because I'm sure he came here thinking he was going to be a big contributor to what's happening here. And now that Pacheco has become the starter, and Andy, whatever debate we have about this guy, we can all, again, agree that Andy Reid loves him. And he's finding whatever possible way he was talking about this on this press conference with Zoom call, talking about how can we get this guy more touches. And so that's the death knell to someone like Ronald Jones if they're trying to move hell and high water to get more than 10 touches for Pacheco. What does it mean for him? I mean, he can see that there's three guys in front of him and not many carries to be split up. So I don't know why he's on the roster. I've said this. I don't know why they've got 4 running backs on the roster. I still don't know why he's there. And to me, it's like he should be gone by now.
I think Brett Veach had a really high evaluation of Jones coming out of USC when he came out of USC. I think he is weirdly, even though we never sort of thought of it this way, he was the buy low guy, the same way that Kadarius Toney was a buy low guy, the same way DeAndre Baker was a buy low guy, the same way, Mike Hughes is a buy low guy. And, to the Chiefs' credit, like when they make those buy low plays, they don't always like make it so that that player has to be out there, right? Like, and that is, very much to, I think, Andy Reid, but also Brett Veach's credit, because they don't necessarily make, those players end up having to have a role, even though Brett Veach acquires them in large part because he's clinging in some ways to the evaluation they had of him pre-draft.
Yeah, I get that, but like I think the only reason we're having this discussion, nobody was like, when are they going to release Derek Gore last year, right? Like that was not a topic. He was, I don't know, he might have started the year on the practice squad, and then he got to the active roster. They played him fairly quickly once he got to the active roster, but it's because Ronald Jones has 1,000 yards or almost 1,000 yards on a Super Bowl team. It's because he was a high draft pick. It's because he played for a high profile program that everybody's aware of him. But somebody's the freaking 4th-string running back on every team, and they don't play much. And that's the reality of what Ronald Jones is. The biggest shock to the system and why we're seeing the Twitter is Ronald Jones isn't aware that he's the 4th-string running back yet, right? That hasn't sunk into him. He still has that sense of like, hey, I've always been the guy. I should still be the guy. And, bounce to 2 more teams and be used in this role, and he'll knock that crap off. He might even be thrilled to go run down a kick. He might even learn to pass block. He might even learn to catch and actually get himself out on the field with some of these things when he recognizes that he's not the next Eric Dickerson, which I'm sure to get to the NFL, everybody thinks they are going to be that great back. But I think this is more about everybody around. I think he's hip to it. Like I said, I think he's oblivious to, his own reality. But I think the Chiefs are like, so what? The lowest guy on the roster tweeted a couple of times. Like, is Chris Jones going to mutiny because Ronald Jones isn't playing? No. Is Patrick Mahomes going to demand a trade because Ronald Jones isn't on the field? No. Is Travis Kelce going to leave town? No. I think this is one where, this team is right about where it's supposed to be. It's pretty good. Really, its measuring stick is going to be, in all likelihood, the AFC Championship game against the Buffalo Bills. And, I think until then, we find things to talk about, and certainly the fans find things to talk about because in reality they know that's it. But the four-string running back just doesn't play much, and I think if he's called upon,
but most people don't have a four-string running back. That's the point. You have a four-string running back, and you got a fullback, so you got 5 guys in the room who really aren't difference makers for you. I just from a roster building perspective, I don't.
But who would you what are they missing then, Jeff? Because I would say, like, if you're going to roll with Jerick McKinnon and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you're not planning on 250 carries at either one of those guys because they've never been able to stay healthy. I mean, I think you have to have, when you go down that road, and we can unwind all the way back to why'd you take Clyde Edwards-Helaire? We've been through that. He's there now, and you're tied into him cap wise. He's not going anywhere. McKinnon, when he plays, Eric thinks he's, they're just using him a little so that they can break the glass when the emergency of the playoffs arrives, and then he's going to be the guy. We know that's Eric's theory. I don't think it's a bad one either, by the way. I think he probably is the best guy. But I think when the reality is those are your 2 best backs.
But they're not the starters. But Pacheco's the best back.
How he carried it 8. No one's a starter. I think that's the point. I think, when you're running the 7th rounder out there, this is it. This is truly a committee. And I think overall their total expenditure, even with what they're paying Clyde Edwards-Helaire, is it's less than 1% on the running back position. So all in all, forget about the names or where they were drafted. This is a cost-effective position that to this point has done what they've needed them to do.
I just don't get why you got a guy on your active roster who's not playing. You don't have a great running game, and he's not getting opportunities. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I mean, Jeff, isn't it just like it's sort of exactly the reason that they got Kadarius Toney to a certain extent as well, right? I mean, they have injury history in MVS, they have injury history in Juju, especially. He's there in case somebody gets hurt, right? We haven't seen injuries to McKinnon, who missed. He was on IR last year for a few games. He missed 2 straight years with the San Francisco 49ers. Edwards-Helaire has not played every game in a season yet in his career. And obviously Pacheco, if Clyde got injured, they would play Ronald Jones as the 2, I would imagine, right? And then
let me come back to, if not him, then who, right? We'll get an offensive tackle. Well, an offensive tackle that's produced at his position, the way Ronald Jones has produced at his, is not available for $1 million, right? I think that's the thing is there are lots of running backs.
Being paid that much.
Yeah. But I guess the point I'm making is that they haven't been effective enough in the run game to say, let's wait until someone gets hurt and then use the guy. That's the point I'm making.
How? Should they be running out and pounding the rock for 200 yards so they can?
No, I'm just saying that
I'm saying points like the Titans blueprint.
No, I'm just saying that we've had constant and on this message board the same thing, that the running backs have not been impressive by and large. And so I think he's a good enough player that you could use him. If you're not using him, the idea of we're keeping him around unless one of these guys who isn't impressive gets hurt doesn't really carry much weight with me.
I think we might be confusing the comments on the message boards for not running it more or not running it more effectively, as opposed to listen. Clyde Edwards-Helaire takes his grief because of the draft pick and not delivering the goods. But for one, I'm okay with the running. Listen, I'm getting more bold between listening to you now and Sam McDowell, the Kansas City Star columnist, who's telling me they don't run the ball well enough. You know what it is? It's echoes of 2019. It's echoes of when the Chiefs can't beat the Ravens. They don't run the ball well enough, right? That was the boogeyman that was supposed to hold them back in 19. Steve Spagnuolo had made the defense better, but this mystical run game, boy, you got to ground and pound, and they can't do it. And I think they're fine at running back. I think this roster is actually very well constructed, and the fact that Ronald Jones is on the team and they haven't had to play him is a positive and not a weakness.
Well, again, I think not having to play him and deciding not to play him, I think are two different things. I don't think that they're holding on to him as if he's some kind of like break glass, using the playoffs type weapon. I think it's just they've kept him around for some reason. I don't understand what the reason is, except to say that, hey, we got 4 running backs.
I don't know.
Didn't run the football.
I don't think they want to run the football. That's my point. They're scoring 2.9 points per game more than everybody in the league. Even God's gift to the game, the Buffalo Bills, they're outscoring by 3 points a game.
Yeah, and you're making a point for me. Why keep him around?
The Bills just traded a draft pick for Nyheim Hines. They just took a guy in the second round in Dalvin Cook's brother James Cook. And they have, Devin Singletary, who's fine. Like I feel like,
and they all play, right? They all play.
Ronald Jones is making $1 million. This isn't I don't like what the opportunity cost is. What you save $500K to, right? You save $500K, and you're developing Pacheco. Like you don't want like two different and the practice squad is 16 guys deep now. Like you have Jerry on Ely and guys like that like I believe are still on the practice squad. Like I don't know, like the opportunity cost is not that high to keep Ronald Jones on the roster. And like I think again with Kadarius Toney and with Ronald Jones, you have injury history at these positions, and maybe you just want a guy. You want a guy like who's been there before if guys get injured.
By the way, the Bills have 540 some odd yards from their running backs. 540 from their running backs. And nobody's screaming and yelling about them, going out and getting another running back.
Because he'll play. Because he'll play for them. Because all those guys play.
James Cook has 24 carries for 132 yards.
Which is 24 more than Ronald Jones has. What's so hard to understand here?
He's the third back. The third back for the Chiefs is Jerick McKinnon, who has 29 for 119. I think, like I said, I'll go back to it. Only because we know the name Ronald Jones are we even worrying about this. If his name was Derek Gore, nobody'd give a crap.
Well, I think we're worrying about it because he's tweeting because he's unhappy. That's why we're worried about it. That's why we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't talk about it before. He's been here forever, and no one mentioned his name. So he's pissed now. So he's a story.
I for one, will vote not a big deal on that one. Britt Reid was sentenced to 3 years in prison today. We're not going to spend long on this because it's not football, obviously. But I think all of us would agree that in 2020 or January of 20 or February of 21, when they entered their second consecutive Super Bowl, it was a tremendous distraction. Does this serve, the Chiefs are sitting at 5-2. Does this serve to, at least close the book on that chapter of the Kansas City Chiefs and allow, maybe a weight to be lifted from at least the head coach when all is said and done?
I don't think it does. I don't think, that little girl is always going to be in bad shape. So that's going to be a story for her for the rest. That's going to be her story for the rest of her life. Andy Reid has lost a son. Another son's gone to jail now. I don't think he's able to put this to bed now because there's closure on it. He knows what's happened. It's going to hurt. I can't imagine. I've got a 9-year-old son who's sitting upstairs right now. I can't imagine a day when he would be going to jail for something like this and it wouldn't affect me. And so, yeah, it was a horrible story when it happened. Back in 2020. 2021, right, is when it happened, right? It was a 2020 season.
End of January, beginning of February.
Yeah, so it was a horrible story. Then it's a horrible story now. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, the football team's got to move forward, and Andy Reid's got to move forward, and so does the family of the little girl. But, I think there's a part of everybody who's involved to a certain extent, bigger, depending on your relationship to the people involved, that's always going to be affected by it.
Derek, you got any thoughts on what it means to close the book on this?
I hate to sound crass, but 2 of the 3 worst losses since January of 2021 have happened around news of this, right? The Super Bowl against Tampa Bay, and when he was when he pled guilty in week 3, right? I mean, there are, and I think Jeff brought it up. I mean, all 3 of us are dads. Like, if our kids were involved in something like this, and I think it would affect us, So, for me, I think of, this is a game where the Chiefs are favored by a lot, much like the Indianapolis game. I think this would be a game when you think about, they would already kind of let down a little bit just because of the opponent. That is something I worry about. Obviously, the more important things are, the quality of life for this little girl, and Britt Reid obviously being able to rehabilitate himself and become a member of society again. But from a football standpoint, like, I think it will be a distraction for the Chiefs. It has been the previous times that this has come up and been in the news.
Yeah. Now, with at least whatever dealings, no one can do anything, right? Like, there's nothing left to be done,
Right.
but time for Britt Reid, obviously, as far as the process, and and we'll see if that does. We'll see if this week against the Tennessee Titans ends up being a distraction. I will point out the Tennessee Titans have won 3 of the last 4 games against these 2 teams. Head to head, and the Chiefs are just 4-8 since the name Titans was hatched. This franchise has kind of had their number. Jeff, let's start with this. How good are the Tennessee Titans this year?
Well, right now they're the 2nd seed. The playoffs started today, so they're doing They're doing what Titans do. They're making their move. Now, granted, they've beaten some. I don't think any of those wins in their 5-game win streak have come against anybody with a winning record right now. But they are exceptional at knowing who they are, at playing to that. I was in Seattle this past weekend watching them play the Giants. Same thing there. Like, they play like the Seahawks play, which is they're unabashed in their love of the run game, of playing defense, special teams, game managing, quarterback play, and they don't stray away from that. And so for me, this is always a tough matchup for the Chiefs, just because it's a clash of styles. One team is very wide open, very explosive, very prolific, relying on their quarterback to make a lot of spectacular plays. Another team wants their monster running back to carry the ball 40 times and have, almost like just pounding flesh, every down. And so there is a place that's what football is ultimately. I mean, for me, it's about wearing people down. It's about being physical. It's about trying to, inflict your will on somebody. And so the Chiefs, I think personnel wise, they just don't match up well with that. And so they end up getting pulled into these rock fights. They end up having to play close games. It's always, a cage match, and they don't get the big plays they want to get. So I think that's why it's always a tough game, and why the Titans have often found ways to win it.
Styles make fights, I think, is the phrase we would use to describe what you were talking about, Jeff. 5-game win streak after dropping their first 2, lost by only 1 point to the Giants, lost to the Bills 41-7. Since then, they've beaten the Colts 24-17, Commanders 21-17, Colts 19-10, and the Texans last week 17-10. They've clearly found what works. They're grinding out victories. Good football teams know how to win close games. I'm an adamant believer in that. The only game that wasn't one score was the 19-10 win over the Colts, Eric. But I do look back at that 41-7 beatdown at the hands of the Bills, and I think that's as much an indicator of what this team is. And when they go up against what are the big boys, which I will go ahead and include the Eagles in this, because you guys get upset when I don't give them their love.
4 touchdown passes, Jalen Hurts.
That's why I'll do it.
Like that?
I did like it.
How you like that?
I like it a lot. That's what brings me around to starting to believe. But Eric, they ain't going to swing. Malik Willis ain't going to throw 4. And other than the year that Ryan Tannehill sold his soul to the devil, he ain't going to do it either, right? He hadn't been close to that magic year that got him paid ever since he got paid. Does this look more like that Bills loss, or do they grind it down into that rock fight like Jeff's talking about?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at their season so far, they opened about a touchdown favorite against the Giants and lost that game. They were a full 10-point dog to the Bills when they got killed. They were home underdogs to the Raiders in week 3. And I know you had Adam Hill on, I think yesterday on the show, and you guys talked about how bad, I call them, they haven't earned Vegas, how bad Oakland is this year. They were 2-point home underdogs to that team. They were underdogs to the Colts. They were a pick'em against the Commanders. They were a pick'em last week against Houston. Houston stinks. This team stinks. However, they have one thing, and it keeps me as an analytics guy away from being too down on this team because I don't understand how it happens, and that is Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel is like the next Mike Tomlin, in my opinion, where kind of nothing makes sense. The guy doesn't do a lot of like really super smart things, as far as fourth downs and, special teams and all that kind of stuff. But, and his roster is terrible. You look at the offensive line's bad, defense is bad, corners aren't good. They don't get much of a pass rush because they don't have Harold Landry this year. Both tackles are out, and yet they still win. And I think Mike Vrabel deserves a lot of respect. And as a 12.5-point underdog, depending upon where you look, I think they should very much be respected in this game against the Chiefs. So I think it's a lot more like some of these other games where no one thought anything of the Titans and they were spunky relative to the game where they got blown out by Buffalo.
I put it up there, the comment about A.J. Brown being the guy that really got the Chiefs last time. Derrick Henry did go for 200 yards. He's had 4 straight games over 100. Jeff, how do you go about stopping Derrick Henry? Or do you agree with what I'm sure Eric's going to say after you? They don't have to stop Derrick Henry to beat him.
You got to stop Derrick Henry. At the end of the day, they might come here and hand the ball off 50 times. Him and the other dude. The other guy was Hilliard, ran for 80-some yards on 9 carries against the Texans. They are just, I don't think analytics really do define what this team does. Again, what makes them tough to beat is they're very comfortable being ugly. And so they don't get in those places that a lot of teams get into against a team like the Chiefs, or the Bills for that matter, where they're like, oh my God, we can't deal with this. And I think, they're always a slow starting team. So I chalk up the Buffalo win more to that's how they are in the first couple weeks of the season. They're just ugly. And in fact, every year we have these conversations about the Titans just being, is this the year when they finally come back to earth and they end up being a 6-11 team and drafting in the top 12 of the draft, and they don't do it because they find their legs around week 3 or week 4 and they get on a run, and no matter how they're viewed by the odds makers, they end up winning the games that they either aren't picked to win or that they should win. This team does a great job of winning games that they're supposed to win. And so I do think that, look, you got to gang tackle the dude. You have to, your defensive lineman got to put on their big boy pants. And I think not having Frank Clark in a game like this is a big issue because he is a pretty good edge setter. He is somebody who is going to, get down there and get physical. Even as a lighter player this year, he's not afraid to do that kind of stuff. So, Nick Bolton, Willie Gay, somebody mentioned Leo Chenal, the corners, everybody's got to come and tackle because they're gonna pound him 35 times. I guarantee you that much.
Yeah. Eric, listen, I know where you stand on running the football. The Titans, though, I think embrace what they can do, and they do it well. And I think Mike Vrabel is as good as it gets of saying, this is what I've got, and I'm going to maximize it. But I think this is one I'm going to go the route of, I think this one looks like the AFC Championship game in January of 20. I think he'll come out. I think he'll want to do it. They'll have a quarter of success somewhere. Hopefully for Titans fans, it's in that first quarter because it keeps them in the game longer. But we remember the Titans were up 10-0 in that game. And then the Chiefs said, bye, we're leaving.
Yeah.
And
or it could be the Colts this year.
It could be. And listen, games like that happen. Yeah. If you can be +4, if Skyy Moore is going to muff punts at the goal line and do all that, sure, that keeps you around. If you're going to give away possessions, but I think this is one, if they don't shoot themselves in the foot, for all of Vrabel's, for all of his abilities, he should not be able to keep this team in this game. That's why the spread's 12.5.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. I just know that this team finds a way to get turnovers and they find a way to make it ugly. I don't think it's going to be a 12-point game.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Jeff. I think if you add and if you add to that the Andy Reid thing, where we know that Andy coaches down to the opponent sometimes, and this special circumstance of this week, and furthermore, I don't know if Malik Willis is going to start or Tannehill is going to start, but when I watched that game against the Texans, Malik Willis has real gravity in the run game. When you look at some of those touchdowns that Henry or some of those runs that Henry had, linebackers were in their tracks. They were not flowing to Henry the same way than usual, right? And I think that that's because you have a running quarterback who's a legitimate threat. And so, if they run out of the gun, for example, teams are not worried. They're worried about Malik Willis coming out the back door. And I think that that's something as well where there's a little bit of uncertainty associated with, even if Tannehill, were to play and they mix in Malik Willis, there's a lot of uncertainty there. And I think that that's one of the things that the Titans might do to make the Chiefs, they put their young linebackers in conflict, right? Their three linebackers are a third year guy who's really played about a second year guy in terms of snaps, a second year guy, and a rookie.
I believe what will happen in this game is that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes will walk out on the field. They will take their belt off, and they will tell the Titans that the beatings begin now, and they will whip their ass. That's what I think is going to happen in this game. I don't think this game is going to be close.
By the way, the 2019 AFC Championship game, the Chiefs won by 11, which would be a Titans cover in this game.
Okay.
I'm looking at the markets are giving the Titans a lot of points.
Do you what about can I go back and I'll be happy to stand on my own and collect yet another steak dinner if you want the Titans in the 12.
I'm not betting again. No. I know I've waved my finger in this podcast so it's viewed too many times. I'm not betting against my Chiefs, not against you. I'm just saying I'm trying to save the folks in the comment sections, our friends, Steve, Matt, Thomas, Brent, Quinn. I'm trying to save my brothers and sisters here a little bit of money because as somebody who, usually likes to bet the Chiefs, this is one where I'm just telling people if you're not feeling it, lay off.
I'm feeling it. I will not lay off. The Texans suck. 17-10.
I bet you probably said that last year when the Chiefs played them.
Probably
27-3.
Probably.
We say it every year. The Chiefs aren't even the Chiefs are so much better personnel-wise than the Titans. There's no question about it. But that's what the trap that everybody falls into with the Titans.
Agreed. But I called the Colts game. I like the Colts and the points, and I said I think they'll drag it down into a rock fight.
Yeah,
and there was coming off of I can't remember what the games were. Was it coming? It was coming off of the Chargers and looking ahead to the Bucks. You're coming off a bye week. And there's no looking past the 5-2 Tennessee Titans, who this ass kicking is fresh in the Chiefs' mind. And I think they come out looking for get evens. I think they're coming to settle a score. And I think this is a bad spot to be the Tennessee Titans. There's no A.J. Brown, and that is a big, big difference. There's no Taylor Lewin. That is a big, big difference. If Ryan Tannehill doesn't play, name your score. Name your score. How?
Jeff's not convinced. You look.
It's the old okie doke, man. Like Mike Vrabel. The Chiefs. I put the Chiefs to win. I just think it's going to be a closer game.
Soren, are we? What's the text on at 8:45 Eastern from me to you? Is when is Andy going to call the good plays? Is this an Andy calling the good plays game? Because honestly, that's the handicap for every Chiefs game. Is Andy going to call the good plays?
I think the text is
this team is also and this is sneaky, by the way. This team is a better road team than they're a home team, and I don't know why. I don't know why, but this team focuses better on the road. And obviously, the Indianapolis game is the outlier. But this team I mean, I don't. Do they? Is it like Is it like the older brother that spots his younger brother 17 points every freaking game when they're at home? I don't know, but like this team like comes out slow at home.
Yeah, and Vrabel's one of those guys that he steals a lot of Belichick's tricks, and you're not going to see pass rushers racing past Mahomes trying to get the big hit. You're not going to see
he's not
corners out of position.
Exactly.
Exactly. Kevin Byers they're going to mix up coverages. They're going to do a lot of things that they're going to slow the game down. They're going to beat up Kelsey. They're going to do all the tricks are coming out in this game. And so that's, to Eric's initial point, Mike Vrabel is the wild card here.
Last year, the Tennessee Titans lost to the Arizona Cardinals 38-13 and 36-13 to the New England Patriots. I think there's truth in everything that you're saying. And listen, everybody takes a beat down every now and then, but here's a 34-17 loss to a mediocre Colt team 2 years before
I think we're talking about how they match it with the Chiefs.
Every game they
played with the Chiefs.
Can I pause?
Can I
make one more statement? And I don't mean to just absolutely blowtorch this player, but there has not been a Kansas City Chief that I can remember in 5 or 6 years that has fallen off the face of the earth as bad as Derrick Henry has. Derrick Henry, after 2020, was going to get a big contract. He was terrible last season, and he's been worse this year. Like they do, unless they elevate Danny Shelton or something like that, they do not have a defensive tackle that can hold the point of attack against the run. And that is like, look, Derrick Henry's had a good career prior to last year, so that he can obviously do it. But like Chris Jones is not a hold the point of attack defensive tackle. He's an Russia. He's a one gap guy, right? As Jeff said, no Frank Clark. I mean, Joshua Kane-Doe might be playing this week. And my guy Derrick Henry has been playing middle linebacker for 2 years. And so like I that's what I get worried about in a game like this, where again, Vrabel dumps expected points on fourth downs. He's not a magician analytically, but I bet you he's watched Chiefs film and said, Deshaun Wharton's out for the year. Derrick Henry stinks. Let's be who we are against this team.
And don't you think at this point in coming through a bye week, let's remember Danny Shelton was added to this roster very late in training camp, and not that playing the nose and D tackle is, like learning the playbook for a quarterback on offense, up and going. But I have to believe that, yes, Danny Shelton is active for this game. I will be stunned if he's not. And frankly, Colin Saunders is taking away numerous snaps from Derrick Henry as it is already. But yes, Henry is a tremendous problem. I mean, it is a big problem. But can we acknowledge, like, it's not just the Bucs not only running it 3 times. When you're 7 games into the season, you're giving up less than 100 yards a game on the ground defensively, and you're the number 3 rush defense in the NFL. That's not all the one game where the Bucs didn't even try to run. Can we acknowledge that the run defense is significantly better? They have Willie Gay back. I bristle at all I know it's become a hip thing to talk about Nick Bolton not beating blocks. No linebacker's great at beating blocks. All the Ray Lewis highlight tapes are not him blowing up a guard and then getting somebody. They're him running untouched and blowing somebody up. And so there's nothing wrong with Nick Bolton. There's nothing wrong with Willie Gay. And that's a big, and I think even Harris will play. If I saw Chenal's name was being thrown around. Harris is a run stuffer. And I think that they are better equipped to handle Derrick Henry and what the Titans want to do now, because I believe Danny Shelton's going to play, and his job is just going to be to take up space. And he will be significantly more effective than what we've seen from Derrick Henry.
I'm a fan of that, but there is that.
Look, Jeff. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's like Derrick Henry is the running back version of Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. It's like, it really doesn't matter how well you're playing defense. It just matters how much can you contain somebody like that. And so they did a good job of containing him last year, and they lost 27-3. I picked them to win. I just don't see where the history suggests. We always talk analytics and lines and all this stuff. That's all based off history anyway, right? Well, history's shown that
I agree.
Titans play these guys tough.
I agree, and I think this is where I'll go upstream, because I think everyone's going to jump in betting wise and beyond the Titans because, they just have the Chiefs number. And I think you can have someone's number, but there's a reason why you do. And I think a lot of the elements of why they had the number have changed, especially if Tannehill doesn't play. A.J. Brown was a huge part of it. I mean, the receiving core for this team. I mean, really?
Robert Woods is a good ball player.
He's all right.
Yeah.
You want to name another wideout?
Westbrook, Akina.
Thoughts?
Yeah. I will tell you what you said about the Colts game is true. If they take care of the football, they should win easily.
Yes.
They start dropping the ball over the place and throwing
you.
interceptions.
Or if their kicker starts missing kicks again.
Missing kicks, yeah.
Is anybody predicting
bad snaps?
I mean, anyone catching punts for this football team, boys? I don't know.
I think it's Kadarius Toney. Is anybody?
Kadarius Toney could not crack the crack. Like who's play? You want to ask who plays wide receiver for Tennessee?
Don't get me started.
Wide receiver for New York.
Yeah,
like Kadarius Toney is not in game shape. Are we kidding?
Eddie Kennison couldn't crack the roster for the Denver Broncos.
I remember that. That was a good acquisition for the Chiefs. But
this guy had Eddie Kennison.
Look, my thing is for this team to cover a 12.5, 13-point spread, a lot of stuff's going to have to go right. And I think the case that Jeff and I are making is that there's a number of things that can go wrong. And I don't think the Chiefs will lose. I think they'll win. But I also think I'm not going to put real money on minus 12.5 on the Chiefs.
I am. They are going to lay an absolute beatdown on the Tennessee Titans because you want to know why? Former Chiefs legend Chris Conley is not having a big day. They have 4 active wide receivers.
I did see Conley out there.
One of them was on the Chiefs practice squad like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
5 minutes ago. And he's going to be out there catching passes. Come on. You're joking, right? You're joking.
Oh, boy.
I mean, Derrick Henry is a moose. Yeah. Are we?
What, do you know what he did last time against the Kansas City Chiefs? A run defense that blew, that Derek Nottie sucked back then too. Do you know what he did last time?
They were up like 37-3 in the first half of that game.
29 carries. 29 carries.
They didn't need him. They didn't need him.
I'll go back to what was said. 8 catches for 133 yards and a touchdown. A.J. Brown was the guy who did the damage, and he ain't walking through those doors.
But the point is they ran him 29 times. They didn't give up on it. Even though he didn't put up huge numbers, that's what they do. They just keep running.
Anthony Hitchens and Daniel Sorensen will not be running out onto that field. My feet will be up at the kick.
I do not want to root against the Chiefs. I do not want to root against the Chiefs. I do not want to root against the Chiefs, but my guy, Petro, chill out.
12.5. You big puss. 12.5.
Hey, Petro, by the way, to the listeners, they don't know this, but it is Soren's birthday. And because of that, I have not sworn once on this show today. That was that I wanted to give Petro a birthday present of not having to text me during the show and be like, Eric, calm the F down. But then Petro drops that P word at the end of the podcast. Okay. I love that.
No, it's different. Petro. I didn't have the Y on there. It's very different. Y is where all the everything is riding on. All right, real quick before we go, the rest of the season. This is for when you throw in the preseason and training camp. This really is the midway point of the season, even though only 7, regular season games down, 10 to go. Jeff, your expectations for the second half for the Kansas City Chiefs are what? Any way you want to describe it?
I mean, I picked them to not win the AFC West. I like them now to do it. I don't know if the Chargers can make up that kind of ground. If they do, it'd be miraculous. But yeah, they'll be the second best team in the AFC the rest of the way. I think Buffalo is Buffalo. You look at their schedule; they may be 16-1. They may not lose again in this year.
My theory is 15-2 because they don't need the last one. They're 15-1 and they bench everybody because the Chiefs are 13-3. They also bench everybody and end up 13-4. They may have to go all the way to get to 13-4 and hold somebody off. That's where I've got the Chiefs. I had them 12-5 coming into the year. I really feel like the schedule's played down from what we thought it would be. I have the Chiefs finishing up at 13-4, but the 1 seed is not in play. I'm with you. I think the Bills, when you look at their schedule, they're going to run and hide. But I don't think the Chiefs will be playing the regulars in Week 18.
I think
to hold on
Chad
to the
Henne
2 seed.
beats Russell Wilson.
You think what?
I think Chad Henne beats Russell Wilson.
So what do you got? What do you feel on record?
I still say 13-4. I think they'll drop a couple of these games. Like there's always going to be the Andy Reid special where like he just doesn't call the good plays and they lose a game that they shouldn't lose, like the Bengals game last year or something like that. Or I mean, every time I watch the Bengals play, I get angry that Zach Taylor outcoached Andy Reid twice. So yeah, I think they go 13-4. I think that they'll probably get the 2 seed.
I love these. Let's ride, Henny. I can't wait till we preview a Broncos game just to get into the hot mess that is Russell Wilson these days. All right, so we're feeling, and we've all got him at the 2 seed when the season's over.
Yeah,
2 seed it is. Okay, all right, there it is. All right, so make sure you're with us every Tuesday, 9 p. Central. Next week, you'll hear these guys admit that I nailed it on this Titan game after the Chiefs roll out a 37-10 victory over the Tennessee Titans, which would get the over by a half point, if I'm not mistaken, Eric, right? 46.5, the total on this, I think, for the game. So something to keep in mind there.
Yep.
All right, that's going to do it. If you would, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the love button. Doesn't cost you nothing. Helps us a lot. So if you enjoyed the podcast, please hit that up. Tell all your friends about the podcast as well. A lot of things going on with it that we'll be talking about here over the next few weeks and on into the off season. So we're looking forward to that. And of course, tomorrow night, if you're regular, our Too Deep, Too Deep podcast about the NFL. We'll be talking about that trade deadline with all the teams involved, a lot more tomorrow night. That podcast comes your way 9 p.m. Central on Wednesday. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, SumerSports.com. I'm Soren Petro, Sports Radio 810 WHB. It's 810WHB.com. If you want to check my show out, thank you very much for joining us here on Red, Gold, and Bold.